Kale had not left the East Gate in 7 years. That was the first thing I told every man who came to serve at Fernhallow. The first thing I told every visiting lord who arrived hoping to impress me with ease. Do not reach for the wolf at the gate. He will not let you. He has not let anyone. Not since my first Luna died. And Kale walked to the East Gate and sat down and decided, without my asking him, that his purpose was the watching. 7 winters. Kale at the gate in rain, in the particular heavy snow that settles on the river valley without warning, in the first pale weeks of spring, when the mud comes up and the wolves from the lower pack run through the fields howling for the joy of it. He watched them go. He did not follow. I gave him no command. He had chosen something I did not fully understand, and I respected it, the way you respect a grief you cannot reach. He let no one near him, not Lord Cavan's son, who thought his pack blood would count for something. Not the council's guest, Lady Farron, who arrived from the Northern Territories with a chest of dried venison and the fixed intention of charming my wolf first and then me. Kale let her set the venison down 3 paces away, and then looked at the wall beyond her, with the amber patience of something very old. She reported to her father that the wolf at the palace gate was cursed. I did not correct her. My bondsmen learned to warn people on arrival. The wolf at the East Gate is not unfriendly. He simply does not choose. What no one said, because no one knew how to say it, was that watching Kale had become the only way I understood something about myself. There was a quality in his stillness, a waiting that was not resignation, a patience that was not absence, that I recognized without naming. I had my pack. I had Fernhallow and the River Territory and the 40 wolves who ran the border at my word. I had the work of governing, the work of keeping peace, the councils and the trade agreements, and the careful management of a pack kingdom that had not seen war in 80 years, and intended to keep it that way. I did not have what Kale was waiting for. I did not let myself think about it directly. I had been trained by 7 years of practice not to look at that particular gap too closely, the way you learn not to press a bruise. My Luna had died in the 3rd year of our bond, not from violence, not from the pack's doing, but from a winter fever that came so quickly and went so completely that I had barely understood what was happening until it was over. The bond mark on my wrist had gone quiet the morning she left. It had not fully woken since. I was not cursed. The council's healers had checked for that, in the careful, diplomatic way that means everyone was worried but no one wanted to say so. I was simply waiting. I had Kale's example before me daily. I knew what waiting looked like. So when Kale left the East Gate on a Thursday morning in late autumn, the 23rd day of the cold month, and followed a woman I had never seen before through the garden gate and down the path toward the old moon garden behind the kitchen wing, I stood in the corridor window and watched until they were out of sight. Then I went down. The woman was already in the old moon garden when I arrived at the kitchen wing archway. Kale sat 3 paces behind her, watching her work, with the specific quality of attention I had not seen him give anything in 7 years. She was digging. She had a pair of heavy leather gardening gloves, a short-handled spade, and a deliberate method that I recognized after a moment as the process of assessing root health. She would lift a small section, examine what came up, press it back with her boot, move 2 paces, try again. She was talking while she did it. Not to me, to the garden, or to the roots, or to herself. I could not hear all of it, only the cadence, which was calm and very certain. "There you are," she said to something she'd uncovered. "I thought you'd be deeper, but you're not. That's sensible of you." Kale made a sound I had never heard him make. Low, not quite a whine, not quite a groan. The sound of a creature that is paying careful attention to something and wants to signal approval without disrupting it. She looked back at him over her shoulder, not startled, as if she'd already registered he was there and had simply been letting him settle. "You're enormous," she said to him. "Did someone tell you that, or are you still working out how large you got?" Kale's tail moved. Not a wag, just a single slow sweep, the way a very large thing moves, when it is pleased but does not wish to make a scene about it. I stood in the archway and felt something move in the region of my chest that I had no category for. I was the Alpha King of Fernhallow. I was not in the habit of feeling things I had no category for. "You've taken my wolf," I said, which was not what I had intended to say at all. She looked up. She did not scramble to her feet or flatten her expression, or produce the bright, careful smile that people assembled when they suddenly noticed me in the room. She just looked, the way you look when you've heard a sound and are determining whether it requires action. "I haven't taken him," she said. "He followed me." "He doesn't follow people." She considered this. "He follows me," she said, and went back to her digging. Cale looked at me with amber eyes, and then looked back at her. I found out, afterward, from the palace steward, that her name was Wren. She had been contracted by the kitchen wing clerk a fortnight earlier to restore the old moon garden, which had gone to neglect in the years since. I did not examine the phrase too closely. In recent years. She had credentials from 2 estates in the Eastern River Territories, letters of reference from both, and a particular reputation for bringing back gardens that other keepers had given up on. She had arrived the previous evening, assessed the moon garden by lamplight, and apparently come back at first light to begin. She had no pack affiliation, that was noted in the contract and explained briefly. She had grown up in a border settlement between 2 territories, neither of which had formally claimed her family line, and she had spent her adult years traveling between estates and keeps as a contracted garden keeper. She had no wolf of her own. She worked alone. I read the contract twice. I did not know why I read it twice. I set it down, went to the east gate, looked at the empty post where Cale usually sat, and felt the odd, specific quality of something having shifted. He was not at the gate for 6 days. I went to the moon garden every morning. I did not acknowledge, to myself or anyone else, that this was what I was doing. I told myself I was checking the restoration progress, which was my business since the moon garden was part of the palace grounds and the renovation was being funded from the palace accounts. This was technically true. It was not the whole truth. The moon garden was in better shape each day. It had a shape to it I'd forgotten. A quarter circle of raised beds behind the kitchen wing, angled to catch the late light, with an old stone path in the center, and a dead rose bush at the far end that Wren had cut back to 3-inch stubs and apparently expected to grow back. She was correct about this. I could see the first tight green buddings on the 5th day. Cale sat in the path each morning while she worked. He had claimed a spot near the old stone bench where the dead rosebush threw its shadow, and he did not move from it except to shift slightly when the angle of the light required it. He was, by every measure, on guard duty. He had simply transferred his post. I found this so unreasonable that I could not properly be angry about it. On the 3rd day, Wren left a small pile of dried rose hips on the stone beside him. He ate them with the slow deliberation of an animal accepting an offering, which is not quite the same thing as an animal accepting food. There is a precision to it, a ceremony of acknowledgement. He ate 3 and left 1, which was either an accident or a message. I chose not to interpret it. On the 4th day she brought a second pile. He ate all 4. I sat on the old stone bench on the 5th day while she worked. I had not planned to sit. The bench was there, and the morning was cold in the particular clean way of the cold month in a river valley, and Wren was measuring the distance between 2 raised beds with a length of knotted rope, and Cale was watching her with the quality of attention that had previously been reserved for 7 years of watching nothing at all. I sat down and watched with him. He never did this for anyone else, I said after a while. I was not sure why I said it. The silence had been comfortable in a way I wasn't accustomed to, and I found I wanted to put something into it. "I know," she said. "You told me. I told you once." "Yes, but the steward told me 3 more times, and 2 of your bondsmen told me on separate occasions, and the cook told me over the bread this morning." She moved the rope 2 inches to the left and tied off the second knot. "Everyone here seems to consider it important that I know Cale is exceptional. He is exceptional. I can see that." She looked at the wolf, who looked back at her. "What was he doing before? Before the gate? Running the border with me. He was my lead scout. He could track anything in the river territory. 3 days scent on frozen ground." I paused. "He chose the gate after my Luna died. I didn't ask him to." She was quiet for a moment. She moved to the 3rd knot. "That's grief," she said. "A wolf who lost what he was built to protect and picked the next closest thing he could find." She tied off the knot. "He's very loyal." I looked at Cale. Cale looked at the rosebush stubs, which were making new growth. "He wasn't protecting the gate," I said. It came out more plainly than I'd intended. "He was waiting." She looked at me then, not with the careful diplomatic expression people produced when I said something unexpected. but with the steady attention she gave everything, the roots, the knot measurements, the wolf, as if I was worth the same quality of looking. "Waiting for what?" she said. I did not have an answer. Or rather, I had an answer I had not let myself say aloud in 7 years, and it sat in my chest now, like something that had been perfectly still for a long time and had just begun, very quietly, to move. "I don't know yet," I said. She nodded and went back to her measuring. Cale exhaled slowly and lay down with his chin on his forepaws, and the cold morning settled around all three of us, and I did not go back to the great hall for another hour. This became, without anyone deciding it should, a pattern. I came to the moon garden in the morning. Cale was always already there. Wren would be working, cutting back dead growth, turning soil, replanting the bulbs she'd sourced from somewhere, with the particular expertise of someone who knew exactly which supplier would have what she needed, and how to negotiate a fair price for it. She worked fast and without fuss, the way people work when they've been doing something long enough that thought and motion have merged. I sat on the old bench and we talked, or we didn't. The days when we didn't were not empty. That surprised me. I had grown accustomed, over 7 years, to silence as a kind of pressure. The silence of a great hall where people are trying not to say the things they're thinking, or the silence of a border watch when you're listening for something dangerous. The silence in the moon garden was different. It had the quality of a room where something is growing, patient, without expectation. I learned things about her in pieces, the way you learn the layout of a new territory, not all at once, but as the landscape reveals itself to your feet. She had been in 11 estates and keeps before Fernhallow, over 20 years of working. She had a method for every kind of neglected garden, what to cut back hard, what to coax, what to replant entirely, and what to wait on. She was not sentimental about plants that couldn't be saved, and she was not hasty with plants that looked dead but weren't. "You have to learn what's waiting, and what's actually gone," she said once, on a morning when she was assessing a stand of winter herbs along the south wall. "Most people can't tell the difference. They pull everything that looks dead and replant, or they leave everything and hope. Neither works." "What's the tell?" I said. She pulled up a small root section and held it toward the pale winter light. The outside was dry and colorless, but at the cut end, a faint green-white showed, just a thread of it. "That," she said. "If there's any living part at all, somewhere in the root structure, it can come back. You have to look for it. Not assume it's there, not assume it's gone. Look." I looked at the root section in her hand, the faint green thread at the cut end. She set it back carefully, pressed the soil around it, moved on. I thought about that for the rest of the day. I thought about it the following morning, too, sitting on the bench while she worked through the section of old herb beds near the east wall. And I thought about it during the council session that afternoon, where Cavan was presenting the quarterly border reports with his usual thorough competence, and I spent a portion of his third summary thinking about green threads in root sections, which was not the most attentive I have ever been in a council meeting. The council had been watching me come back from the moon garden every morning for 10 days. They had said nothing. This was either professional discretion or a shared, silent agreement not to be the one to raise it, and I did not investigate which. That was something I turned over as well, in the quiet of the second week. She had been working gardens alone for 20 years, and every motion she made confirmed it. The assurance of someone who does not need to be watched to know she's doing the work correctly, who is not performing competence but simply exercising it. When I arrived each morning, she did not change what she was doing or begin explaining it. She continued, and if I asked a question, she answered it, and if I didn't, she let the quiet be what it was. I was unused to being somewhere I wasn't needed. It was, I found, a considerable relief. The bondsmen brought me dispatches in the garden twice. They had never done this before, since I had always been in the great hall or the border room for morning business. Neither of them said anything about the bench or the wolf or the garden keeper who was working 12 feet away, and acknowledged them with a nod. They handed me the dispatches, waited for my responses, and went back inside with expressions of studied neutrality that I recognized as the expression of people who are exercising professional excellence in an unexpected situation. On the 9th morning, it snowed. The particular early snow of the cold month that comes sideways and sticks to everything and melts by midday. Wren continued working. She had a waxed canvas layer over her coat that she produced from somewhere, and she tucked it around herself and kept on. I went inside after an hour and came back with 2 cups of the heavy spiced tea that the kitchen made for the border watches. I set one on the stone bench near her tools. She came for it after a while, warming her hands on the cup. She looked at the snow falling on the old rosebush stubs, which were more than stubs now. They had put out a remarkable amount of growth in 2 weeks, given how thoroughly she'd cut them back. "They're showing off," I said. "They've been ready for a while," she said. "They just needed someone to cut away what was blocking them." She sipped the tea. "This is good. The border watch recipe," I said. "The cooks make it stronger than I ask for, and I've stopped arguing." She almost smiled. It was a small motion, but I had been watching her face for 9 days and I had learned to read the smaller register of her expressions. The shift from attention to assessment, the particular quality of her focus when she was working out a problem in the garden, the way something in her face settled when she was satisfied with what she'd found. This almost smile was different from all of those. Warmer, less considered. "Is it always like this?" she said. She was looking out at the moon garden, the snow on the herb beds, kale lying on the cold stone path with perfect unconcern. "Fern Hollow, the winter. The snow comes and goes until the deep month," I said. "Then it stays. The river doesn't freeze entirely. There's a current near the east bank that keeps it open all season. The wolves run the ice in the shallows." "Kale too?" "He used to," I said, "before the gate." She looked at Kale. He had one eye open, watching the rosebush stubs accumulate snow, monitoring them with the focused dedication he brought to everything. "I grew up between territories," she said. "Neither pack claimed us. I've never minded. It meant I could go anywhere." She paused. "But I've never been somewhere that felt like staying. Most places I can see the edge of my time there from the beginning, the arc of the contract. The season when the garden will be settled and the work will be done." She held the cup between her palms. "This one I can't see the edge of." I looked at her profile in the sideways snow. "Is that a problem?" I said. "I'm still deciding," she said. She went back to work and I sat on the bench in the snow, and Kale opened the other eye, and the 3 of us stayed in the moon garden until the snow stopped, and the pale winter sun came back, and turned everything to silver and water. Kale began coming back to the gate in the evenings. I noticed this with the specific quality of attention I usually reserved for things that were important. He would spend the morning in the garden and the afternoon at the gate and the evening splitting his time between the two, lying at the gate until the light went, then padding through the palace corridors to wherever Wren was, which turned out to be a small room in the east wing that the steward had given her, a sensible choice for a garden keeper, since it had a window that looked out toward the moon garden. I knew he went there because I saw him in the corridor once, returning from her door, at an hour when I had no business being in the east wing, and had to tell myself a convincing story about administrative business that required me to walk past the garden keeper's room at 9th bell. He looked at me when he passed, the amber look. Then he continued on. I went back to my own chambers, and sat down at the desk, and looked at the bond mark on my wrist for a long time. It was quiet, not dead, never quite dead, but the subdued quality it had held for 7 years, a warmth that had forgotten how to be bright. While I was sitting there, it pulsed. Very small, very certain, once. I laid my hand flat on the desk and looked at the mark for a long time. Then I went to bed and did not sleep well, which was not a condition I usually suffered from. On the 14th day of the cold month, I know the date because I checked it afterward, because it seemed important. Kale did not come to breakfast. He was not at the gate, which I checked first. He was not in the garden, which I checked second, and I found Wren already there and told her Kale had gone missing, which was the wrong word for it, because wolves do not go missing in their own territory. They simply go somewhere their people haven't found yet. He came to my door last night, she said. She was replanting a section of the south bed, moving a clump of something with careful hands. He was asking me to follow him. I thought I'd misread it. You didn't misread it, I said. I knew what it looked like when Kale wanted someone to follow him. He had done it to me on the eastern border once, tracking a scent I couldn't catch. That particular quality of turning back and waiting and turning again, patient and unhurried, but absolutely clear. Where did he want to go? She said. I looked across the moon garden, past the stone path and the now thriving rosebush stubs and the replanted herb beds, to the far corner where the old garden walls met, and there was a low gate, I had not opened in years. It led to what had been the Luna's private garden, a second, smaller enclosure, older than the moon garden, where the previous owners of Fernhallow had planted a particular kind of night-flowering vine that bloomed once a year at the winter solstice. The vine had not bloomed since my Luna died. I had not gone into the garden since. "I think I know," I said. I found Cale at the low gate. He was sitting in front of it in the attitude of a wolf who has been waiting for a reasonable amount of time and is prepared to wait considerably longer. When he saw me, he turned and looked at the gate, then at me. "All right," I said. I did not know why I said it to him, as if we were negotiating. We were, I supposed. We always had been. I opened the gate. The night garden was smaller than I remembered. Or perhaps it had always been small and I had only ever seen it in seasons when it was full, when the vine covered the walls entirely, and the particular sweet sharp scent of the winter flowers filled the space and made it feel large. Now, in the cold month, the vine was bare, stripped back to its woody stems, which ran along the old stone walls in patterns that looked like writing, in a language I didn't know. The solstice was 3 days away. Cale walked in ahead of me, and went to the center of the garden and lay down. He turned 3 times in the old way, which was the way wolves settled for the night when they intended to stay, and put his chin on his forepaws and looked at the gate. I looked at the bare vine stems. The light here was the cold afternoon light, gray-silver, flat and honest. I heard the gate behind me. "Cale," Wren said. She had followed. She stood in the opening of the low gate with one hand on the stone, and looked at the wolf. And Cale lifted his head, and made the sound he'd made in the moon garden on the first day. The low, careful sound of something paying close attention. She came in. She walked to the center of the garden and stood beside him, and looked at the bare vine on the walls the way she looked at roots she was trying to understand. "Winter vine," she said. "Night flowering. It blooms at the solstice?" She looked at me. "When did it last bloom?" 7 years ago," I said. She looked back at the vine, at the woody stems running along the stones. She stepped close to the nearest wall and did what she always did. Reached up and found a stem, pressed her thumbnail carefully at the base of a node. She stood very still. "It's alive," she said. Her voice had changed, very slightly, the way a voice changes when something unexpected happens and the speaker is processing it before deciding how to describe it. "All of it, the whole vine, it's been waiting." She let the stem go. She turned and looked at me. "It's going to bloom at the solstice. All of it at once, I think. It has years of stored growing to do." I looked at her in the flat winter light. I thought about what she'd said in the moon garden 2 weeks ago. Most people can't tell the difference. They pull everything that looks dead and replant, or they leave everything and hope. Look for it. If there's any living part at all, somewhere in the root structure, it can come back. The bond mark on my wrist was not pulsing. It was burning. Not the sharp burning of alarm, not the burning of a wound, the burning of something that has been cold for a very long time and has just come into warmth so quickly that the warmth itself is almost difficult to bear. I pressed my hand against my side and I could feel it through my sleeve, a brightness that had nothing to do with temperature. I looked at Wren's hand. Her left wrist, her working wrist. She had it turned partially away from me, but I could see the edge of it. A mark. New light, gold warm, pulsing with the same steady rhythm as my own. She had gone very still. "That isn't," she said quietly, "a normal reaction to a vine." "No," I said. She turned her wrist over and looked at the mark. The bond mark, burning quiet gold in the flat winter light of a garden that had been waiting 7 years to bloom. I had been careful, over 7 years, about what I let myself want. I had been careful about hope, about the specific kind of openness that makes loss into devastation. I had watched Cale hold his post, and I had understood, bone deep, the patience required to wait for something you cannot force, and cannot hurry, and cannot know will come. But I had also, somewhere in the cold months' mornings in the garden, stopped being careful about Wren. I had stopped being careful about the way she pressed soil around a root section as if the root's life was worth taking time over, about the silence in the moon garden that didn't press, about the way she spoke to Cale, as if he was worth addressing, as if what he wanted was a reasonable question, about the fact that she had seen the gate 20 times and never asked what was through it, and had followed me through it today without hesitation and without making a ceremony of following. I had not been careful, and I was not sorry. I want to explain something to you, I said, and I want to do it clearly, because I think clarity matters more than eloquence in situations like this. She looked at me, the steady attention, amber as Kale's. The mark on your wrist is a bond mark, I said. It means you're my fated mate. It means Kale knew before I did, or rather, it means I knew before I let myself know, and Kale simply didn't bother to pretend. I paused. I don't think Kale has been waiting at the gate for 7 years grieving my first Luna. I think he has been waiting for you to arrive. She looked at Kale. Kale looked back with the expression of a wolf who has accomplished a complex task and is waiting for his assessment to be confirmed. He's very confident about it, she said. He's always been right before, I said. She looked at her wrist again. The bond mark was settling now, still warm, but quieter, the way a fire settles when it's fully caught. She rubbed her thumb across it once, slowly, and I felt it on my own wrist as a soft echo, which meant the bond was fully formed, and had been forming for longer than either of us had noticed. What does it mean? She said. For me, I want to know the practical shape of it. I don't have a pack. I'm contracted here through the spring. The moon garden isn't finished. I have obligations. I loved her for that. I did not say so yet, but I loved her for asking the practical question first, for not pretending that a bond mark resolved logistics. It means the obligations are honored, I said. The moon garden and whatever comes after it. It means you are not required to choose between the work and this. It means I don't have claims on your time that override the ones you've made to yourself. I paused. It means, if you're willing, that I'd like to ask you, very clearly, if you would consider making this permanent. The mark, the bond, the staying. I am not asking you to give up anything you've built. I'm asking if you'd consider adding to it. She was quiet for a while. The winter light shifted, a cloud moving, the pale sun returning, sharper. You come to the garden every morning, she said. Yes. That's not administrative oversight. No. And the bench, she said. You sit on the bench. You sat on the bench for an hour on the 5th day, and you thought I didn't notice. But I noticed. I wasn't trying to be invisible, I said. I was trying to be careful. About what? About you. I said it plainly. About wanting something I hadn't examined yet. About the difference between what's waiting and what's actually gone. She looked at me steadily. And then something in her face changed. The smallest shift, the way the light changes when the cloud finally moves. Not the bright, performed smile people assembled in my presence. Something quieter than that. Something real. The vine's going to bloom in 3 days, she said. I'd like to see it. So would I said. So would Kale, she said. Kale made the sound, the low, careful sound of approval, and did not move from the center of the garden. I held out my hand to her, not as a command, not as a ceremony, not as anything other than the simplest thing I knew how to offer. My hand, open, in the garden my first Luna had loved and that the vine had been waiting in for 7 years, on an afternoon when the bond mark on my wrist had been burning since the moment Wren had said the vine was alive. She looked at my hand. Then she put hers in it. The bond settled the way the fire settles when it's fully caught. Deeply, without drama, with the particular solidity of something that has been true for longer than you knew. The bond mark on my wrist warmed once, completely, and then steadied. I could feel the steady warmth of hers, an echo, a counterpart, a thing that matched. I had been very careful, for 7 years, not to press what I couldn't bear to lose. And I was standing in a garden in the cold month, holding the hand of a woman who had come in through the low gate without ceremony, and I found that the carefulness was no longer necessary. It had served its purpose. It could rest. You said the vine has years of stored growing, I said. Yes, she said. What does it do with it? When it blooms? It blooms all at once, she said. Everything it's been holding back. It'll cover the walls in a night. She paused. It'll smell extraordinary. I looked at her in the cold winter light, her hand in mine, Kale at our feet in the center of the garden, the bare vine stems running along the stones in their patterns that looked like writing. We should be here when it does, I said. Yes, she said. We should. We were. On the evening of the solstice, 3 days later, I came to the low gate at dusk with Kale at my side. He had been with me all day, which the bondsmen had observed with expressions of careful diplomacy, since they had 20 years of experience observing things about me and not commenting. I had done very little governing that day. I did not consider this a failure. Wren was already there. She had brought a lamp, the kind with a glass chimney that keeps a steady flame in wind, and she had set it on the old stone bench in the center of the garden, and she was standing near the vine on the south wall with her arms loose at her sides and her face turned up to the bare stems, watching. It had begun. Not quickly, not with any drama or particular announcement. The vine moved the way growth moves when you watch it directly, without visible motion, but unmistakably, certainly, each moment slightly further than the last. The buds had been tight and colorless 2 hours before. Now they were uncurling, and as they uncurled they were pale gold. Not the gold of the bond mark, but the older gold of things that have been growing a long time in the dark and are finally, fully, coming into light. Wren said nothing. She watched the way she watched the root sections and the cut rosebush stubs, with the same complete attention she gave to things she considered worth attending to. I stood beside her and watched with her. By the time the last of the winter dark settled, the south wall was full of them. By the time the moon rose, the solstice moon, the longest night's moon, broad and white above the palace walls, all 4 walls were covered, stem to top, every bud open. The particular sweet sharp scent of the flowers filled the garden the way it had when I first remembered it, the way it had not been in 7 years, and it was so familiar and so new that I stood very still for a moment and did not trust myself to say anything at all. Wren stood beside me. She did not say anything either. She understood about things that required silence to be honored properly. Cale lay in the center of the garden, between us, and closed his eyes. He had waited 7 years at the gate. He had done his work. He was, I thought, the only one of us who had known from the beginning exactly what he was waiting for, and had waited without question, without diminishment, without losing faith in the thing he could not yet see. I reached for Wren's hand in the garden full of flowers. "I want to ask you something," I said, "and I want you to know the answer can be whatever is true." She looked at me with the steady attention that had not changed since the first morning in the moon garden, since she'd looked at me over her shoulder and said he followed me. "I want to offer you the bond formally," I said, "the mark, the claim, my word, before the territory, that you are my fated mate and my Luna, if you'll have it. I'm not asking you to give up the garden, or the work, or the traveling contract, or the way you've built your life. I'm asking if you'd like to build it here, alongside mine. I'm asking if you'll stay." She was quiet for a moment. The flowers moved very slightly in the cold air, gold in the lamplight. "I came here to restore the moon garden," she said. "I have letters of reference and a seasonal contract, and a list of suppliers in the Eastern Territories who will want to know where I am in the spring." "Yes," I said. "And you're asking me to stay." "I'm asking," I said. "You're answering. Those are different things." She looked at the vine-covered walls, the flowers that had bloomed in a night from 7 years of stored growing. She looked at Cale, who did not open his eyes but whose tail moved once, slowly, the single sweep of a large animal that is confident and patient, and does not intend to make a scene. She looked at me. "The moon garden needs the full spring to set properly," she said. "After that, it'll hold without a keeper for a season or 2. I have work to finish here before I can call it done." "I understand," I said. "And I'll want to write the letters," she said. "To the suppliers, to the 2 estates I came from. They deserve to know." "Of course," I said. "And Cale," she said, "will have to decide whether he's at the gate or in the garden on any given day. I'm not going to negotiate that for him. He'll manage it," I said. "He always has." She was still for another moment, and then she turned to face me fully, and she took my hand the way she'd taken it 3 days ago in this same garden. Not as ceremony, not as performance, but as the simplest true thing, the way she pressed soil around a root, because it was worth doing carefully. "Yes," she said, "I'll stay." The bond mark on my wrist blazed warm, once, completely, and then settled into the steady, deep warmth of something that has found what it was built for. I felt hers answer, echo, match. The same rhythm, the same steady burning, the same patient constancy that had been waiting in both of us like a vine in a cold garden. Cale opened his eyes. He looked at us for a moment with the amber gaze that had watched the East Gate for 7 years, that had waited through rain and snow and the long quiet weeks of an ordinary winter for something that could not be hurried and could not be forced, and could not be demanded into arriving before it was ready. Then he stood, and he walked to the low gate, and he went back to his post. He was at the east gate the next morning, and the morning after. But in the evenings, now, he split his time differently. He ran the garden path first, checked the moon garden, went to the door of the east wing, where Wren still kept her room, because some habits settle slowly, and then came back to the gate. He was not waiting anymore. He was keeping watch over what he'd waited for. That is what I have come to understand, in the months since, that Cale had not been at the gate for 7 years out of grief or out of stubbornness or out of any wolf logic I could have named. He had been at the gate because he knew, with the certainty that wolves carry in their bones, that what he was meant to guard had not arrived yet, and he had intended to be there when it did. He was. The night garden bloomed at the solstice for the first time in 7 years, and the wolf who guarded the east gate went to find the gardener, and the gardener stayed, and the bond mark on my wrist is never quiet now. It is warm and steady and certain, the warmth of a fire that has found what it needs and settled in to burn properly. I stood at the gate myself, this morning, beside Cale, in the early light of a winter day that smelled of cold stone and the last of the solstice flowers. I looked at the bond mark on my wrist. Beside it, on the back of my hand, a smear of garden soil from where Wren had caught my hand an hour ago, over a section of the south bed she was explaining. She talks to the plants the way she talked to the root sections and the rosebush stubs and the dead vine and the wolf who followed her from a gate he had not left in 7 years, as if they are worth addressing, as if what they need is a reasonable question. She is right about that. Cale looked up at me, then out across the river valley, then back at the garden gate. I know, I said to him. He made the low sound, the sound of approval, of careful attention, of a wolf who has done his work and knows it. We went in.